Get the idea of beautiful duels, noble generals, and shining armor out of your head. Hollywood has fed us a sweet lie, but reality smelled different. It smelled of sour sweat, cheap garlic, and animal terror. In this video, we will show you the underbelly of ancient warfare that the textbooks keep silent about. You will find out why a Roman formation was tighter than a crowded subway car, and why even the bravest veterans often soiled themselves seconds before a collision. We will tell you what actually happened after a victory, how the wounded were humanely finished off, why legionaries cut fingers off corpses, and at what moment a hero turned into a marauder for whom a human being was just walking currency. Prepare to see how perfect discipline broke the human psyche, turning men into soulless functions, and why veterans, upon returning home, hated Rome more than the enemy. Watch to the end to understand how the greatest military machine in history, created to protect civilization, ultimately devoured itself from the inside. The truth will be dirty, cruel, and frighteningly similar to modern times. Forget everything you have seen in the movies. Get those pretty pictures out of your head, where a noble general on a snow-white horse delivers a pompous speech before the formation, and soldiers run out screaming to engage in spectacular one-on-one duels. Hollywood fed us a sweet lie about war as the art of fencing. But the truth smells different. It smells of the sour sweat of thousands of unwashed bodies, the cheap garlic reeking from your neighbor's mouth, wet wool, dust, and the gut-wrenching animal terror that cramps your stomach. Take a deep breath. Can you smell it? That is the smell of Roman greatness. Imagine you are standing in the third row of a maniple. It is the middle of summer. The sun at its zenith is roasting everything so hard that the air shimmers above the ground, distorting the horizon. On your shoulders lies almost 66 pounds of iron, leather, and wood. Your chainmail, the lorica hamata, has heated up in the sun and turned into an oven in which you are slowly being baked alive. The padding under your helmet is soaked with sweat. Salty drops flood your eyes and sting your skin, but you cannot even raise your hand to wipe your face. You cannot scratch an itch. You can barely breathe. Your personal space right now is a rectangle measuring roughly 20 by 28 inches. To your left, a comrade's shoulder presses into yours. To your right, another one. Behind you, someone is driving the edge of their shield into your lower back, pushing you forward. And in front of you is the back of the legionary in the first row. You are clamped in a vice of human flesh and metal. This is claustrophobia raised to an absolute. You are no longer an individual. You are no longer Marcus, Lucius, or Gaius. You are a brick. A faceless, standard block in the wall that Rome erected to crush the world. In movies, they show us open space. Heroes swing swords, jump and dodge. In reality, you do not even have room to wind up for a strike. If you try to make a wide swing, like in the cinema, you will hit your own comrade in the face with the hilt, or open your side to an enemy spear. Roman combat is not a dance. It is a crush during rush hour in a burning subway. Only everyone is holding a sharpened piece of steel. Do you hear that hum? That is not epic music. That is a deafening, maddening noise. Thousands of feet, shod in iron, knead the dry earth, kicking up pillars of dust that clog your nose and throat. You cough, spitting out black saliva, but the noise does not stop. The strikes of the centurions' staffs against shields to straighten the line. The wild screams of barbarians on the other side of the field, who are trying to scare not you, but themselves. And that low, guttural hum of the earth itself, vibrating from the movement of two living avalanches ready to collide. Could you stand here? Not answering blow for blow, but simply standing and waiting. A legionary is not a lone warrior thirsting for glory. There is no place for heroes here. If you decide to take the initiative, run out of the formation and show your valor, you are a corpse. Moreover, you are a traitor. Because by opening the formation, you kill the man standing to your left and the man standing to your right. The Roman military machine worked not due to individual skill, but due to the total suppression of personality. You were trained for years not to learn how to kill beautifully. You were trained so that you would stop being a human and become a function. Take a look at your shield, the scutum. It is not just protection, it is an offensive weapon. A heavy, curved door with a bronze boss, the umbo, in the middle. When hell begins, your task is not to fence. Your task is to crash, with the entire weight of your body, with all the inertia of the crowd running behind you, into the man opposite. Smash the rim of the shield into his face, break his nose, knock out his teeth, and slam the boss into his sternum to break ribs and knock the air out of his lungs. The Greeks called this othismos, the shove. Imagine a giant rugby match where two multi-ton masses of people try to move each other, sliding on mud and blood. Only the loser in this shoving match does not just fall onto the grass. He falls under the feet of hundreds of people who trample him into the ground, breaking bones, not even noticing what they are walking on. Feel the weight in your right hand, the gladius. A short, wide blade, shaped like a large leaf. It is not created for chopping blows that make sparks fly. It is created for vile, fast, almost surgical work. In this tightness, when you are pressed shield to shield, you only have the opportunity for a short jab, from the bottom up, into the groin, into the stomach, under the ribs, or over the top edge of the shield, into the throat or face. No ringing of steel, only the dull sound of metal hitting flesh and the tearing of fabric. But the most terrifying part happens now, seconds before the collision. You see nothing. Before you is the back of a comrade's head. You are blind. You do not know how many enemies are ahead. You do not know if you are being flanked. You orient yourself only by the whistle, the piercing whistle of signal horns, and the shouts of the centurion, who is swearing over the noise of the battle. Your life depends on whether that guy in the first row holds his shield. If he falls, you are next. Fear in the Legion is not just an emotion, it is a physical state. The adrenaline level is such that time slows down. You hear the blood pounding in your temples, drowning out sounds from outside. Your mouth goes so dry that your tongue feels like sandpaper. Your bladder contracts. Many, even veterans, wet themselves right before the clash. And no one judges them for it. Because the body is dumping ballast before death. Roman tactics were brilliant in their cruelty. They turned war into an industrial assembly line. The Legion did not win because its soldiers were stronger or braver. The barbarians were often taller, physically more powerful, and fought with the fury of the doomed. But they fought like a crowd of heroes. The Romans fought like a single organism, where the life of an individual cell was worth nothing. You were taught to hold the line even when, right next to you, your friend's skull is smashed by a slingstone. You must step over him and close the gap. Instantly. Without pity. Without hesitation. This was a machine of dehumanization, running at full power. To create an empire, one had to first kill the human in one's own soldier, burn out the instinct of self-preservation, and replace it with automatism. Discipline is a beautiful word that historians love to write in textbooks. In practice, it meant that you feared your centurion with his vine staff more than the bearded giant with an axe running at you with a wild roar. The centurion would kill you slowly and shamefully for cowardice. The enemy would kill you quickly. The choice is obvious. And now, the distance is closing. 90 feet left. 60. The air fills with a whistle. These are the pila, heavy javelins, flying toward the enemy. Dull thuds, screams of pain, the crack of splitting barbarian shields. The formation exhales, a unified, bestial exhalation of 1,000 throats. Shields go up, muscles tense, preparing for the impact that will knock the wind out of you. In this second, you cease to be yourself. You become part of the hammer that is about to fall on the anvil. The line between a civilized man and a killer is erased. Only the reflex remains. Strike or die. The wall of shields crashes into living flesh, and the world narrows to the size of your sword's blade, which is looking for a place to plunge. Impact. The world collapses into one blinding flash of pain and noise. At the moment the shields clash, all strategy disappears. The plans of legates, drawn on wax tablets in the silence of tents, vanish. Only animal chaos remains. You no longer see the entire battlefield. Your event horizon narrows to the distance of an outstretched arm. Right in front of you is a face twisted in rage. Not an abstract enemy, not a figurine on a map. A human. You see his rotten teeth, the tattoos on his cheeks, drops of saliva flying from a mouth open in a scream. You smell his sour wine and stale sweat. This is an intimacy you did not want. Killing at a distance, when you loose an arrow into the sky, is statistics. Killing here, in the first row, is a personal drama that lasts a fraction of a second, but burns the soul forever. The gladius in your hand comes alive. Remember what the instructor taught on the parade ground when he hit you on the legs with a stick. Thrust, don't slash. A slashing blow requires a wind-up. It gets stuck in bones. It leaves you open. A thrusting blow is a snake bite. Fast, invisible, deadly. You are not a knight. You are a butcher in a slaughterhouse. While the barbarian raises his long, clumsy sword for a heroic strike, you make a short movement forward with your shield, knocking the wind out of him, and immediately thrust your hand with the blade. Upward from below, under the ribs, or into the groin. It is not loud. It is sickeningly quiet. The gladius enters soft flesh with a wet, squelching sound, like a knife cutting through a sack of wet grain. No ringing. Just the sensation of tissue resistance, which suddenly disappears when the blade finds the emptiness inside the body. And this is where the moment of truth arrives. Psychologists call this overcoming the barrier. It is unnatural for a normal person to kill his own kind. We have a biological block built in. To plunge iron into a living person while looking him straight in the eyes, you need to break the human inside yourself. You see the enemy's pupils dilate. You see surprise. He has not yet realized he is dead. He looks at you, and in that look is a silent question. What for? You feel his weight sagging onto your shield. Feel the life flowing out of him in spurts, hot and sticky. Could you withstand that gaze and not look away? A Roman legionary was obliged to. If you hesitate, if you allow pity or shock to stop your hand for even a moment, the next blow will shatter your collarbone. The instincts of the farmer, the shepherd, the son you were just yesterday, must die right now. In their place comes a cold, calculated void. This is a trance, a combat psychosis. You stop thinking. Your hands do everything themselves. Block with the scutum, strike, block, strike. Step forward onto something soft and slippery. Do not look down. Those are bodies. The bodies of those who stood next to you just a minute ago. You step on the faces of friends and enemies, turning them into a bloody mess, but you do not care. Your psyche slams shut armored shutters, cutting off emotions. Otherwise, you will go mad right here, in the middle of this slaughter. You turn into an automaton, an ideally tuned mechanism for producing corpses. In the middle of the 1st century BC, when Caesar's legions were grinding through Gaul, one of the centurions wrote home that his soldiers looked like sleepwalkers after battle. They eat, but taste nothing. They sleep, but do not rest. Their hands continue to tremble for hours, gripping invisible sword hilts. This is the price the psyche pays for what you do. In combat, time distorts. 5 minutes of hand-to-hand combat seem like an eternity. The human organism is incapable of withstanding such tension for long. Therefore, the Romans rotated. On a whistle, like hockey players. The rear rows filtered forward through the gaps, and the front ones, gasping, bloodied, with insane eyes, fell back. It was a conveyor belt of death. Fresh forces against tired barbarians. A cynical calculation that left no chance for lone heroes. Imagine the sound when a fresh line crashes into an already exhausted enemy. The crunch. Screams of despair. The barbarians see before them not people, but a multi-headed hydra, where a new head, full of strength, immediately grows in place of a severed one. This breaks the will more than casualties. You see fear replace rage in the opponent's eyes. They begin to back away. First, a step. Then 2. And then that critical moment. Someone drops a shield and turns his back to run. An epidemic of panic spreads instantly. The enemy formation crumbles. And then the most terrifying part begins. The battle ends. The butchery begins. A blow to the back is the most frequent type of death in ancient warfare. The Romans knew no chivalry. A fleeing enemy is not a reason for mercy. It is a convenient target. You run after them, hacking at legs, at necks, at unprotected backs. The ground becomes slippery with blood. You fall, get up, strike again. The air is thick as syrup with the smell of disemboweled stomachs and excrement. In this frenzy of the chase, you lose your human form completely. You are no longer protecting Rome. You are simply killing because you can. Because power over another's life is the strongest drug humanity has ever invented. Suddenly, a sharp, piercing trumpet sound. Stand down. The signal acts like the crack of a whip. The fog in your head begins to clear. You stop, breathing heavily, leaning on a bloodied shield. Your heart is pounding so hard it feels ready to break your ribs. You look around. The field, which was a green meadow in the morning, now looks like a slaughterhouse. Mountains of bodies twisted in unnatural poses. A moan. A 1,000-voiced, low moan rising above the earth. The sound of real war. You look at your hands. They are red up to the elbows. This is not paint. This is the life of those people you just turned into objects. At this moment, when the adrenaline leaves, leaving behind a devastating weakness and cold, consciousness returns to you. You are Marcus or Lucius again, but you are different. You have crossed a line from which there is no return. You look at the corpse at your feet, a young guy with a slit throat, and feel nothing but dull indifference. And precisely in this silence that comes after the storm, when the screams of the dying become the only music, a new fire lights up in the eyes of the survivors. Not rage, not fear, but a cold, predatory glint. Eyes begin to scan the dead bodies, evaluating not the scale of the tragedy, but the shine of gold torques on the necks of corpses. The battle for life is over. The battle for loot begins. Silence. It hits the ears harder than the roar of battle. This is not the reverent silence found in libraries or temples. This is a dense, viscous silence hanging over a field where thousands of lives have just been cut short. But if you listen closely, it is woven from sounds that make you want to tear your skin off. It is a symphony of agony, whimpering, inhuman screams, the gurgling wheezes of people choking on their own blood, the scratching of fingernails on dry earth. Thousands of bodies scattered in the mud move like a single chopped-up mass of a giant worm. You stand in the middle of this sea of pain, and the first thing you feel is not the pride of a victor, but an unbearable, gut-wrenching nausea. The adrenaline is gone. Only reality remains. Look at those walking among the bodies. These are not doctors. These are vultures. Special squads from the baggage train, or legionaries themselves, whose turn it was to clean up. In history books, this is often called rendering aid to the wounded, or humane finishing. Nonsense. Forget the word humanism. It had not been invented yet. What is happening now is cold, pragmatic disposal. A Roman will not waste bandages and medicine on an enemy who might pick up a sword again tomorrow. You see a veteran lean over a writhing barbarian. His stomach is slashed open. Entrails have spilled into the dust, mixing with the grass. The barbarian is crying, calling for his mother in a language no one understands. The veteran feels no gloating, but there is no pity in his eyes either. He is tired. He just wants to finish his shift. Businesslike, almost bored, he plunges a dagger under the left collarbone, or slits the throat with a quick, practiced movement. A strike, and silence. One less mouth screaming at the sky. This is not sadism. This is a sanitary norm. A dead enemy is safe. A wounded one is an extra mouth and a threat. The battlefield turns into a giant open-air market where the currency is the belongings of the dead. You walk up to the body of a warrior you might have killed yourself an hour ago. Now he is not an opponent. He is a container of resources. First, weapons. Swords, daggers, spearheads. Iron costs money. Then armor. Stripping chainmail from a limp, heavy corpse is dirty, sweaty work. The body does not help you. It slips out. Arms and legs dangle like those of a rag doll. You have to plant your foot on the dead man's chest to pull off the bloodied shirt. Blood is everywhere. It dries in a crust on your fingers, clogs under your fingernails like black dirt, and you do not even try to scrub it off. Then comes the personal search, the most intimate and disgusting stage of looting. You grope through pockets, untie purses on belts, feel through clothes in search of sewn-in coins. Gold torques on the necks of Gallic chieftains, silver bracelets, rings. Sometimes a ring does not come off a swollen finger. What does a legionary do? He does not look for oil to lubricate the phalanx. He takes out a knife. The crunch of a joint, and the gold band falls into the palm along with a piece of flesh. Nothing personal, just business. Look over there, closer to the center of the carnage. A group of soldiers has started a fire right amidst the pile of bodies. They are sitting on the helmets of fallen enemies like stools. One of them has taken out a pot and is boiling a grain stew. Another is chewing hardtack, holding it with a hand that, 10 minutes ago, was digging through the entrails of a corpse in search of hidden gold. He did not even wipe his palm. He bites the bread, and brown prints remain on the crust. Around them hangs a smell that would make a civilian vomit inside out. A mixture of feces, bowels relax at the moment of death, the metallic spirit of fresh blood, and the sickly sweet aroma of beginning decomposition in the heat. But these people eat with an appetite. They laugh. They discuss how many denarii they will get for this captured sword. This is the true face of a Roman triumph. Not marble statues, but people chewing bread with the taste of death, sitting on corpses. War burns squeamishness out of a person, just as it burns out compassion. A dead human for a legionary is just a piece of meat that can no longer cause harm, but can bring profit. Cynicism becomes protective armor. If you start thinking about every killed man as a person who had a family, children, dreams, you will break. You will hang yourself from the nearest oak. Therefore, you turn them into objects, into trash that needs to be searched and removed. Woe to the vanquished, the famous phrase thrown by the Gallic chieftain Brennus onto the scales of history. But woe to the victors too, because in this slaughterhouse, they lose no less. They lose the ability to see another person as an equal. Look into the eyes of these soldiers sorting through bloodied trinkets. There is emptiness there. Greed, inflated to the size of the universe, has filled the place where a soul used to live. They collect trophies not to become richer. The gold torn from the dead is cursed. It brings no happiness. It goes to wine and whores in the very first camp to forget this smell, this taste of copper in the mouth, for at least an hour. But the thirst for possession remains, and it demands more. The dead have run out. Their pockets are empty, their bodies stripped naked and left for the joy of crows and wolves. But the Legion is an insatiable beast. Iron and gold rings are not enough for it. It needs new food, and the generals know where to find it. They look over the battlefield to where smoke rises behind the hills, to where there are no warriors with swords, to where only old men, women, and children remain. The real loot waits not here among the corpses. The real loot is still breathing, crying, and hiding in cellars. Gold is just a pleasant bonus. The true currency of the ancient world, the fuel on which the Empire's economy runs, is the living human being. And the Legion turns its bloodied formation to go after them. The death machine shifts gears. The war with armies is over. The manhunt begins. War feeds war. This cynical axiom is attributed to Cato the Elder, but every legionary knew the taste of it long before it made it into historical chronicles. A legion in enemy territory is not an army of liberators. It is a swarm of locusts. 5,000 men who need to eat every day. 5,000 machines for digesting calories, trailed by an endless baggage train of mules and merchants. Where to get food? From the barns of those you came to civilize. When a legion passes through a province, it leaves behind a perfectly scorched desert. Imagine you are entering a village. The battle in the field is over, and now the work begins. There are no phalanxes or shield walls here. Here there are woven fences, thatched roofs, and labyrinths of narrow streets. Your goal is not to capture a flag. Your goal is the total stripping of resources. You go from house to house with a torch in one hand and a sword in the other. The order is simple. Anything that cannot be carried or eaten must be destroyed. You burn barns full of grain, condemning the region to starvation next winter. You chop down fruit orchards that grew for decades. You slaughter livestock that you cannot herd away, and leave the carcasses to rot in the sun, to poison the water in the wells with cadaveric poison. This is economic terrorism, raised to the rank of state strategy. But the most valuable resource hides inside the houses. You kick in a flimsy door. In the gloom of the hut, women and children huddle together. Old men, if they are still alive, are already useless. They are written off with a sword strike right on the threshold. But those who are younger, look at them through the eyes of a Roman. You do not see people shivering with terror. You do not hear their pleas. You see walking money. In the ancient world, a human is the most liquid asset, hard currency that transports itself. The woman by the hearth is your future comfortable old age. The child clinging to her hem is a new set of armor or a keg of Falernian wine. The fate of women and children at this moment ceases to be a question of morality and becomes a question of logistics. Officers call this the victor's right to a living trophy. Women become bargaining chips, currency used to pay for soldiers' loyalty. Those less lucky turn into living toys for the camp, whose life is measured in weeks until they are thrown out like broken inventory. Those who get lucky will end up in long columns walking behind the baggage train. Thousands upon thousands of people, tied by the neck like cattle, trudging to Rome. Look at this procession. This is a real conveyor belt of human traffic. Roman slave traders, these vultures of commerce, follow on the army's heels. Deals are made right here against the backdrop of burning villages. A legionary hands over a captive, receives a bag of silver, and moves on. He does not feel like a monster. He feels like a lucky investor. For Rome, this is not a crime. It is the fuel of the economy. The grandeur of the eternal city, its aqueducts, temples, and paved roads are built on the muscle power of these very people you just drove out of their homes. Slavery is the oil of antiquity, and the legion is the drilling rig that pumps this oil non-stop. But for this flow not to dry up, the will must be broken. The Romans were not just killers, they were engineers of terror. One military victory is not enough. The very thought of resistance must cause paralyzing fear. Therefore, terror was demonstrative, theatrical. If a city did not open its gates immediately, it was not just taken by storm, it was turned into a visual aid. Have you ever seen what a road lined with crosses looks like? This is a Roman invention, their trademark sign of quality. 6,000 slaves of Spartacus crucified along the Appian Way is not just an execution, it is a billboard. A message written in the language of pain, understandable to everyone from an illiterate peasant to a tribal chief. A man on a cross dies for days. He suffocates, goes mad from thirst. Birds peck at him while he is still alive. And all this is put on display. You walk past these rows, hear the wheezing, smell the flesh rotting alive, and your brain absorbs the lesson: submission or death in agony. There is no third option. Legionaries often cut off the hands of all men in a captured region. They did not kill them, no. A killed enemy disappears, but a cripple returns to his village. He is alive, he eats, but he cannot hold a sword. He becomes a burden to his tribe and a living reminder of Rome's power. It was a cold mathematical calculation: to mutilate a population so that it physically could not raise a rebellion for the next 20 years. This is exactly how the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, was built. We are used to thinking of it as an era of order and law, but for a Gaul, a Dacian, or a Judean, this peace looked like a concentration camp the size of a continent. Silence on the borders of the empire was ensured not by diplomacy, but by the fact that there was no one left to scream. The earth simply could not absorb the price of victory fast enough. Generals wrote to the Senate about the pacification of provinces, but behind these dry lines lay genocide and mass deportation. But what happens to the soul of a man who does this every day? Not once or twice, but for years. What happens to the psyche of a 20-year-old guy who was given absolute, limitless power over the unarmed? When he realizes he can do anything he wants to a woman or child, and nothing will happen to him for it except praise from the commander. At that moment, the last thing connecting him to the normal world dies inside him. Empathy is burned out with a hot iron. He ceases to be a citizen. He becomes part of a pack, a closed caste where completely different laws apply. And these laws are much more terrifying than those written on the 12 tables in Rome. The demons released to torment the barbarians have now settled inside the legion, and they require new food. How does a person live with what he has just committed? How do you fall asleep when the face of the woman you dragged out of the burning house, not to save her, but to turn her into a trophy, still stands before your eyes? The answer is simple and terrible. You do not live. The part of you that could feel pain, shame, and compassion must die. If it survives, you will go mad. Therefore, the Legion offers you a replacement for a soul: cheap, sour wine and cruel rituals that cement your new essence. In the evening in the camp, the air smells not only of campfire smoke and roasted meat, but also of stale booze. Posca, a mixture of water, vinegar, and cheap wine, is the blood of the Legion. Soldiers drink not for fun. They drink to shut off their heads, to wash away the taste of copper in their mouths, to drown out the screams that continue to ring in their ears even when silence falls. Alcohol becomes anesthesia for the conscience. In this drunken stupor, a special black humor is born. The humor of gallows birds and executioners. You laugh at how funnily the dying man twitched, how ridiculous the old man looked trying to protect his goods. This laughter is a defense mechanism. If you do not turn horror into a joke, the horror will devour you from the inside. You learn to devalue life, to reduce tragedy to an anecdote. But the main tool for breaking personality is not wine. It is fear. Not of barbarians. The barbarian is far away, and you can negotiate with him using a sword. Fear of your own. Look at the man walking between the tents, the centurion. In his hand is a vitis, a vine staff. It is not a symbol of power. It is an instrument of torture. He strikes without warning. For a sideways glance, for a stain on a tunic, for a second of delay. The backs of legionaries turn into scar tissue. Roman discipline, which historians admire so much, was held together by animal terror. A soldier must fear his commander more than the enemy. Only then will he march to certain death on a whistle. But there are things more terrible than beatings. There are rituals that bind you with a collective guarantee of blood. Fustuarium. Death by beating with stones and clubs. Who is beaten? The one who fell asleep at his post or turned coward. Who beats? You. His comrades, his tent mates, those with whom he shared bread this morning. Imagine this scene. The entire legion forms a square. The guilty man, brought forward, is stripped naked. The centurion touches his shoulder with a staff, giving the signal. And you, his friend, are obliged to strike first. If you strike weakly, if you show pity, you are next. You pick up a stone or a club and begin to beat your brother in arms. You see his eyes, full of pleading and lack of understanding, but you strike, again and again, turning his face into a bloody mask, breaking his ribs until he stops breathing. At this moment, you kill the human inside yourself, permanently. You become an accomplice of the system. You are no longer a victim of circumstance. You are an executioner. This is a brilliant psychological trap. The blood of a comrade on your hands binds you to the legion tighter than any oath. You are all tied by one sin. You are a pack of wolves, devouring the weak in your ranks to survive. And hanging over all this is the specter of decimation, the execution of every 10th man. Blind chance. When a cohort flees the battlefield, they do not punish the cowards. They punish everyone. The legionaries are lined up and counted off by 10. The 10th steps out of the formation. It does not matter if he is a brave man or a coward, a veteran or a rookie. The lot is blind, and the 9 remaining must beat this 10th man to death. This is absolute mathematical cruelty. It teaches you that justice does not exist. There is only the will of the commander and chance. Your life does not belong to you. You are expendable material, a digit in a report. Thus, the Brotherhood of Wolves is formed. Inside this cauldron, a new morality is forged. The outside world, the world of civilians, ceases to be yours. You look at them, at these clean, soft people in togas, at merchants, at peasants, with contempt. They do not know the smell of slit guts. They do not know what it is like to kill a friend to survive yourself. They are sheep, and you are wolves guarding them. And, like any wolves, you begin to look at the sheep as prey. Empathy becomes an atavism, a dangerous weakness. If you pity an enemy, he will kill you. If you pity a friend, the centurion will kill you. The heart becomes covered with a callus, hard as the soul of a caliga. You become a perfect tool. You do not ask questions like what for and why. You just wait for an order. All the complexity of human nature, all shades of feelings are chopped off, leaving only basic instincts: food, sleep, violence, survival. And so, after years of such a life, when your soul is burned to the ground and your hands are used to the weight of a gladius more than a plough, you are told that your service is over. You survived. You went through hell. You did things that make the gods turn away in shame. And now, you are free. But where does a man return who has a scorched desert inside him? A man who has forgotten how to love, but learned to hate to perfection. The legionary gathers his meager belongings, hangs his earned sword on his belt, and turns his face toward home, toward Italy. But he does not yet know that the home he remembers no longer exists. And the most terrifying thing, he does not know that he is carrying the war with him, in his head. And soon this war will spill out onto the streets of the cities he swore to protect. You walk along the very road that perhaps your fathers paved. Italy. The air here should smell of home, warm bread, olive oil, the smoke of the native hearth. You imagined this moment for 10 years. 10 years while you rotted in the trenches of Gaul, while you froze on passes and swallowed sand in Spain. The thought of returning was the only thing keeping you from madness when you were washing a comrade's guts off your tunic. You thought, I will return, and everything will be as before. But here you stand at a familiar turn, and your heart skips a beat. The home is gone. Instead of the small farm where your childhood passed, where every bush was familiar, an endless alien plantation spreads before you. A huge latifundia that has swallowed the horizon. The old boundary stones have been uprooted, the fences demolished, and on the field your father cultivated with his own hands, bent figures are now working. You come closer and see brands on their foreheads. Slaves. Sardinians, Gauls, Thracians. The very people you conquered. The very barbarians you drove before you in chains for thousands of miles. Now they are here. They are working on the land that belonged to you by birthright. The irony of fate hits backhanded, harder than a centurion's club. Your victories made slaves so cheap that a free peasant became simply unprofitable. You, a Roman legionary, destroyed your own future with your own hands. You conquered the world for Rome, but in this world, there was no place left for you. An overseer approaches you. He is not a Roman. He is a Greek or Syrian, a groomed slave smelling of expensive oils who is worth more than your entire life. He looks at your worn caligae, at your scars, at your faded cloak with the squeamishness with which one looks at a stray dog. "Get lost," he says in perfect Latin. "This land now belongs to the senator." And he names a name, the name of a man who never held anything heavier than a goblet of wine in his hands, who sat in Rome and bought up your ios while you spilled blood for his greatness. The laws of Rome are harsh, but for the poor, they are deadly. While you served the Republic, your debt grew. Your family could not compete with giant estates using free slave labor. The farm was sold for pennies. Your relatives? Maybe they died of typhus in the slums of Subura. Maybe they became farmhands themselves. You stand in the middle of the road, gripping the hilt of your gladius, and realize your life has been stolen. Not by enemies, by your own people. You have nowhere to go but to Rome, into the belly of the beast. The city meets you not with a triumphal arch, but with the stench of slop and noise that splits your head. You walk the streets of the eternal city and feel like an alien from another planet. You are a stranger among your own. Life boils around you, a life you do not understand. Idle crowds demanding bread and circuses, powdered youths discussing Greek philosophy and prices for hetairai, merchants shouting about discounts. No one looks at you with gratitude. To them, you are a dirty, dangerous ragamuffin, spoiling the view of marble porticos. You try to find a job, but who needs a hired worker when there are slaves? A slave does not require wages. He will not go on a drinking binge remembering the screams of the killed. You only know how to kill, build camps, and march in formation. In peaceful Rome, these skills are not worth a dime. You see senators floating by in their litters, surrounded by a crowd of clients and bodyguards. Their togas are dazzlingly white, their hands soft as women's. They talk about the good of the Republic, about sacred duty. But you know the truth. You have seen the guts of this Republic on battlefields, and now you see who is getting fat on this slaughter. An abyss grows between you and these well-fed townspeople. You begin to hate them. Hate them for their softness, for their naivety, for their safety paid for by your nightmares. They complain that the wine is not sweet enough, or that the water in the baths is too hot. And you remember drinking urine from a puddle so as not to die of thirst in a besieged fortress. A dull black malice boils inside you. This is the syndrome of the outcast, the trauma of a man who gave everything and received a spit in the face in return. At night you cannot sleep. The silence of the city presses on your ears. You miss the snoring of comrades, the clang of metal, the feeling of an elbow next to you. You wake up in a cold sweat, grabbing for a non-existent sword, because in your sleep, the shadows of the killed come to you again. But during the day, these shadows retreat before a reality that is more terrible than war, the reality of poverty. You sleep under bridges, in the doorways of temples built on trophies won by your blood, and you see that you are not alone. Look around. In the shadows of columns, in cheap taverns, in lines for free grain, thousands of the same faces. Faces with scars, with that empty, glassy gaze that only people who have looked beyond the edge possess. Veterans, heroes of the Republic, tools of war thrown into the trash. This is no longer just a personal tragedy. This is a social time bomb. Rome is flooded with people who do not know how to plow, but know perfectly how to slit throats. People who have nothing to lose. People who feel they were betrayed. The Gracchi brothers will try to give you land, try to restore justice, but the system will devour them, tear them to pieces right in the forum, splashing blood on the sacred stones. And then the last illusion will collapse. You will understand. The law does not work. The Senate is a club of rich men protecting their chests. There is no justice. There is only force. And so you sit in a dirty tavern, twisting the last copper coin in your fingers, and listen to conversations. Someone whispers that a new war is gathering in the north, that a recruitment is needed, that the old rules no longer apply. You look up. There is no more patriotism in your eyes. There is no love for the Senate and people of Rome. There is only the cold calculation of a mercenary and a thirst for revenge. You are not waiting for a politician who will promise you rights. You are waiting for a leader. Someone who will put a sword in your hands, feed you, and say, "Go and take what is yours." And when such a man appears, you will follow him, not for the sake of Rome. You will follow him against Rome. And the Savior came, but not in the shining robes of a priest, and not in a senator's toga smelling of lavender. He came in a campaign cloak soaked in road dust. Gaius Marius, a man who looked at the crowds of beggars, embittered vagrants filling the streets of Rome, and saw in them not a social problem, but a perfect weapon. Before him, the legion was a gathering of landowners, people who had something to lose and somewhere to return to. Marius committed a revolution with one stroke of the pen. He abolished the property qualification. He opened the gates of the barracks to those who had nothing but their own lives and hungry children. For the proletarians. Think about this word. Proletarius. One who serves the state only by producing offspring. Human functions. Extra mouths. Marius put a sword in their hands and said, "Now you are Rome." This was the most massive social elevator in the history of antiquity, and at the same time, a death sentence for the Republic. Yesterday's shepherd, a thief from Subura, a ruined farmer, all of them instantly turned into respected people as soon as they put on a soldier's belt. The army gave them what society could not: sandals on their feet, hot stew in their stomachs, and most importantly, a meaning for existence. But for this ticket to life, one had to pay the full price. Marius did not just recruit soldiers, he created a new breed of people. Forget about baggage trains with slaves carrying your things. Now you carry everything of yours on yourself. Legionaries received the nickname Marius's Mules, not for a witty phrase. Imagine, on you are armor, weapons, entrenching tools, a pickaxe, a shovel, an axe, a supply of food for 3 days, a pot, and a couple of stakes for a palisade. 88 or even 110 pounds of load tied to a special fork behind your shoulders. You do not just march, you run. 25 miles a day, every day. This monstrous load did 2 things. First, it turned yesterday's weaklings into sinews of steel, capable of walking halfway across the world and immediately entering battle. And second, it tore the soldier away from the land. You are no longer tied to a home, to the harvest season, to a family. Your home is a leather tent for 8. Your family is the contubernum, those 7 guys with whom you sleep, eat, and kill. Your land is the place where you are standing right now. The Legion became an autonomous, self-sufficient state that moves in space. And here happens the main psychological shift that historians often miss behind the description of battles. To whom is this soldier loyal now? To the Senate and people of Rome? For Marius's mule, the Senate is a bunch of gorged old men who stole his father's farm, and the people of Rome is a crowd of loafers spitting at his back. The only person who matters is the general, the one who gave him a job, the one who pays the salary, the one who shares the hardships of the march with him and eats the same porridge by the fire. The general becomes a father, a god, and, what is even more important, the only banker. The legion turns into a private corporation, into a gang of marauders on a colossal scale. The contract is simple. You give the general your loyalty and blood, and he promises you a share in the loot and a piece of land for old age. A legionary's pension fund is located not in the state treasury, but in his commander's pocket. If the general wins, you will be rich. If the general loses or is removed from office by politicians, you will be left with nothing. Therefore, the general's success becomes your personal matter of survival. You begin to look at your commander with fanatical adoration. When Julius Caesar or Pompey addresses soldiers, they no longer say citizens, they say comrades. Feel the difference? This is a break in the connection with civil society. You no longer serve the law, you serve a personality. You are ready to slit the throat of anyone your leader points his finger at, be it a Gallic chieftain, a senator, or another Roman legion. Thus is born a professional caste of killers, completely alienated from the country it allegedly protects. They have their own language, a mixture of Latin and barracks slang. They have their own gods, the standards of the legion, the eagles, which are worshipped like idols. To lose an eagle is worse than death. It is the loss of the legion's soul. They have their own laws, where the right of the strong is the only truth. A civilian to them is a pagani, which in soldiers' jargon means yokel, civilian, almost a subhuman. This system worked perfectly, as long as conquests were happening on the external borders. The machine ground up barbarians, enriched generals, and gave jobs to the poor. But what happens when the general's ambitions become greater than the law allows? Behind him stand 30,000 professional cutthroats who are loyal only to him. They have no conscience, no pity, no respect for ancient traditions. They know only the order. And one day the general realizes, why ask the Senate for permission if he holds in his hands a force capable of taking everything? The reform designed to save Rome created the mechanism for its destruction. Legions turned into loaded pistols held to the temple of the Republic. Power leaked from the Forum into military camps. Now, the fate of the world was decided not by voting in togas, but by the mood of veterans gripping sword hilts. And these veterans absolutely did not care whom they robbed. Distant Parthia or rich Italy. They were just waiting for a sign. And this sign inevitably had to appear when one of the great commanders decided that Rome was just another city that could be taken by storm. Gold flowing into the pockets of legates blinded them, and they began to see enemies not in the barbarians beyond the Rhine, but in each other. The moment arrives when the predator, having devoured all the sheep in the district, turns its head and sees another predator before it. This was the inevitable finale. The machine created to conquer the world has no stop button. It needs blood for the gears to keep turning. And when external enemies ran out or became too small to satisfy the ambitions of generals, the legions turned 180 degrees. The spearhead, which for centuries looked outward, aimed at the heart of Rome. Imagine this surreal horror. You are standing in formation. The calendar says year 49 BC, or 82, or 42. Dates change, the essence remains the same. The air trembles with heat, but you are cold. Because opposite you, across the field, stands not a crowd of half-naked barbarians in skins. There stand the same, even, geometrically flawless rows of red shields. There shine the same eagles. There sound the exact same commands in your native Latin. Civil war is a war with your own reflection. You raise your gladius, and the man opposite you does the same, with the same speed and technique. You both studied from the same textbooks. You both know what the opponent will do in the next second. This is a chess match where the pieces are made of meat, and the players know all the moves in advance. The efficiency of the Roman army, its discipline and lethality, now work against itself. This is an autoimmune disease of the empire. The body's protective cells have gone mad and started devouring healthy tissue. The Battle of Pharsalus, Philippi, Mutina. Historians describe them as great tactical duels between Caesar and Pompey, Antony and Brutus. But for the soldier in the first row, it was the dirtiest job of his life. Killing a Gaul is easy. He is an alien, he looks like a beast, he speaks a barking dialect. But how do you kill a man who swears with the same curse words as you? How do you plunge a sword into the face of a guy with whom you might have drunk in the same tavern in Capua? To force soldiers to do this, generals had to pump them with propaganda to the limit. They betrayed the Republic. They want to take away your land. They are not Romans, they are slaves of ambition. Lies flowed like a river, turning former fellow citizens into monsters. And it worked. The massacre was monstrous precisely because it was a massacre of professionals. No one ran in panic. Legions stood to the death, grinding each other down with the methodical nature of a meat grinder. Fields were littered not just with corpses, but with the nation's best gene pool. The flower of Italian youth destroying itself on the whim of 2 or 3 egomaniacs. But the real hell was not happening on the battlefield. Hell came to the cities. When Lucius Cornelius Sulla became the first in history to lead legions on Rome, he opened a Pandora's box that could no longer be slammed shut. He showed that the Constitution, laws, sacred borders, these are just words. If you have 6 legions, you are the law. Remember the word prescriptions. Sounds like a boring bureaucratic term, doesn't it? In reality, it was the legalization of mass murder. Sulla, and later the triumvirates, simply hung lists in the forum. White boards with names written in red paint. If your name was there, you were a walking corpse. Any person, your slave, your neighbor, your own son, had the right, no, was obliged to kill you and bring your head to the authorities. They paid for this, generously. 12,000 denarii for a senator's head. Rome was swept by a wave of terror. This was not the rage of battle. This was a cold, calculated hunt. Heads were displayed on the rostra, the orator's tribune in the forum, where speeches about freedom once sounded. Now the tongues of orators rotted there. The most famous example is the head and hands of Cicero, nailed to wood. Hands that wrote philosophical treatises and a tongue that defended the Republic became food for flies. Mark Antony's wife, Fulvia, stuck her gold hairpins into the dead orator's tongue. It was a gesture. Words mean nothing anymore. Only steel speaks. But the most terrible thing about the prescriptions was not even the violence, but its motive. Politics very quickly faded into the background. Banal robbery began. Are you rich? Do you have a villa in Campania that the dictator's favorite took a liking to? Congratulations. You are an enemy of the people. Your name was written into the list retroactively, already after you were stabbed in your own bed. Neighbors informed on neighbors to expand their plot. Slaves killed masters for freedom. The moral fabric of society, stitched together for centuries, was torn to shreds in a couple of months. Romans realized there are no own people. There are only predators and prey. Civil wars mowed down the old aristocracy at the root. Those very noble senators from textbooks disappeared. They were slaughtered by whole families. In their place came new people, cynical, cruel upstarts who rose on blood, faithful dogs of military warlords. It was in this cauldron of fratricide that the Roman Republic burned. It did not fall under the blows of barbarians. It committed suicide. It slit its veins in the warm bath of its own greatness. The winner took all. But what was this all? A scorched Italy, ruined provinces, mountains of corpses, and a population paralyzed by fear. People were tired. They were so exhausted by decades of endless slaughter that they were ready to give their freedom, their votes, their dignity to anyone who would simply promise that tomorrow they would not be killed. They craved silence. And they got it. When Octavian Augustus, the last survivor in this battle royale, proclaimed the end of the wars, the people wept with happiness. They welcomed their new master, not understanding that they were signing a contract with the devil. The Republic died. Long live the Empire. But this world, the Pax Romana, which poets love to talk about so much, was built on a foundation of bones. It was the peace of a prison, where order was ensured by a warden with a club. The facade was restored, the marble washed of blood, but rot had already settled inside the building. The system that devours its creators simply took a pause to digest what it had swallowed, before beginning to rot alive under the shine of gold. And then silence fell. That blessed silence that goddesses and mothers prayed for. Octavian Augustus, a genius of political marketing, solemnly closes the gates of the Temple of Janus. The wars are over. He utters a phrase that will go down in eternity. I found Rome a city of brick, and left it a city of marble. Beautiful, isn't it? But if you go up closer to this marble and scratch it with a fingernail, you will discover beneath it the same caked blood. Pax Romana, the famous Roman peace, was the greatest illusion in human history. It was a golden cage, the bars of which were made of legions, and the lock was held by fear. Peace inside the empire was bought at the price of an endless, dirty war on its outskirts. Look at a map of that time. See that thin red line cutting through Europe and Asia? The limes, the border. It is not just a fence. It is an open wound that did not heal for centuries. While in Rome, poets composed odes and patricians basked in baths, here, in the damp forests of Germany and the deserts of Syria, the meat grinder did not stop for a minute. Imagine the life of a legionary of the peace era. There are no more great campaigns, no chance to loot a rich city and return home a Croesus. There is only endless, dull garrison duty. You rot in a wooden fort at the edge of the world. Around is the hostile silence of the thicket, from where a dart can fly at any second. You are not a conqueror, you are a watchman. Your task is to be a human shield against which waves of barbarians trying to break through to the feeding trough crash. This is a war of attrition. Ambushes, small skirmishes, patrols knee-deep in mud. A soldier's psyche deforms differently here than in big battles. This is not the acute psychosis of an attack. This is the slow, viscous madness of waiting for death. And this machine required fuel. A monstrous amount of fuel. The Roman army turned from an instrument of expansion into a giant parasite devouring its own state. Think about the economics of this process. 25 and sometimes 30 legions. Hundreds of thousands of professional soldiers who need to be paid salaries in silver, fed, clothed, and sent to retirement with a piece of land. Where to get money if conquests have stopped? If the influx of new slaves and gold has dried up? The answer is simple. From the pockets of those this army protects. Taxes in the provinces skyrocket. A peasant in Gaul or Egypt works from dawn to dusk not to feed his family, but to pay for a new shield for a legionary on the Danube. the empire begins to eat itself. The economy stagnates because all resources go to maintaining the security block. It is a vicious circle. To collect taxes from a disgruntled population, an army is needed. And to maintain an army, taxes are needed. But the most terrible thing was happening not on the borders and not in the treasury. The most terrible thing was happening in the heads of the soldiers. They understood the main secret of the empire. The emperor is not a viceroy of the gods on earth. The emperor is the one at whom the swords of the legions point. Power finally shifted from the Senate to the barracks of the Praetorian Guard. Look at these men in shining armor standing behind Caesar's back. Praetorians, the elite, bodyguards. But who guards the emperor from his own guard? No one. These people quickly realized that their silent consent costs more than all the gold of Rome. They turned into kingmakers. Didn't like the emperor? Is he too stingy? Too strict? A night visit to the bedroom, a pillow over the face or a dagger in the ribs, and the prefects of the guard are already dragging a frightened Uncle Claudius out from behind a curtain or proclaiming another general ruler. The apotheosis of this madness came in the year 193. After the murder of another emperor, the Praetorians did the unthinkable. They put the throne of the Roman Empire up for auction. Imagine this scene. The most powerful state on the planet is being sold like old furniture or a thoroughbred horse. Soldiers shout from the camp walls, "Who will bid more?" And the rich Senator Didius Julianus buys himself the title of ruler of the world, promising each guardsman 25,000 sesterces. At that moment, the mask of greatness slipped off completely. The Roman peace turned out to be a fiction. The legion, created to protect the state, privatized the state. The soldier no longer served Rome. Rome served the soldier. Emperors became hostages of their armies, forced to constantly raise salaries and hand out gifts just to avoid being killed by their own sentries. The discipline about which legends were composed dissolved. Now loyalty was measured exclusively by the clinking of coins. The very composition of the army changed beyond recognition. Look into the faces of these Roman soldiers of the 3rd century. You will struggle to find Italian features there. Romans from Italy no longer wanted to serve. Why die in swamps if you can live on the dole in the city? They began to recruit into the legions those very barbarians with whom Rome had fought for centuries. Goths, Sarmatians, Thracians put on Roman helmets, took pila in their hands, but remained strangers at heart. They did not care about Jupiter, the capital, or the great history of ancestors. For them, Rome was simply a rich employer, a cash cow. A barbarianization from within occurred. The army, called to protect civilization from savages, became half-savage itself. The facade of the empire still sparkled. The giant baths of Caracalla were being built, new forums were erected, statues of emperors became larger and more pompous. But this was the architecture of deception. Behind marble walls lay a rotting, crumbling structure. Society divided into 2 camps, armed men who took what they wanted, and the unarmed majority who remained silent and paid. Social elevators stopped. Corruption became the only method of management. Rome turned into a colossus with feet of clay, and these feet were shod in soldiers' caligae. The whole system held only on inertia and fear of the alternative. People tolerated the tyranny of soldier emperors because they feared chaos. But chaos was already here. It lived in every garrison where a commander decided he was more worthy of the purple mantle than that guy in Rome. Civil wars became a permanent state. In the 3rd century, Emperors changed so often that provinces did not have time to mint coins with new profiles. The average term of rule was 2 to 3 years. The end, almost always violent death. This was agony stretched out in time. The empire resembled a terminally ill patient, pumping himself with stimulants to appear healthy. Gold, pomp, parades, all this was a screen behind which the cadaveric smell of decay hid. The great Roman dream of order and law drowned in the greed of those who were supposed to guard it. And somewhere far away, in the steppes of the east and the forests of the north, real predators already smelled this scent. They knew, the beast is wounded, the beast is old, the beast is eating itself. It only remained to come and finish it off. And so, the giant flywheel that had been spinning for 1,000 years makes a last grinding sound and stops. The mechanism freezes, not because a stone got into the gears, but because the fuel ran out. The great Roman Empire was not killed. It died of hunger. This entire monstrous structure, from the helmet of the last legionary to the gold wreath on the emperor's head, was designed for only one goal: expansion. To devour new lands, digest new peoples, suck resources into the insatiable womb of the eternal city. But the world is finite. When the legions ran into oceans and sands, when there was no one left to rob, the economy built on violence collapsed into itself. Historians love to dramatize the year 476, a picturesque fall, the barbarian Odoacer ripping the purple from the shoulders of the boy emperor Romulus Augustulus. But let's be honest, this was not the finale of a tragedy, but simply the cleaning up of decorations after the audience had already left. Rome committed suicide long before the first Goth stepped over the threshold of the Senate. That very instrument which forged the empire's greatness, the legion, became the instrument of its execution. The army, created as a shield, turned into a cancerous tumor whose metastases penetrated every organ of the state. Legionaries, swearing allegiance to generals rather than the law, tore the body of their homeland to pieces in a drunken brawl for power. Look at those called the Killers of Rome: Alaric, Odoacer, Theodoric. These are not aliens from space. These are not wild beasts running out of the forest. These are products of the Roman system. They were Roman generals. They wore Roman titles. They learned to fight from Roman textbooks. They are the logical result of that very barbarianization we spoke about. The empire hired them, taught them to kill, and then refused to pay. They came to Rome not to destroy civilization, but to collect their debt. This was not a storming of a fortress by enemies. This was a riot of security guards whose wages had been delayed for years. When Alaric entered Rome in the year 410, it was a shock to the world not because the city fell, but because it turned out there was no king. The city was empty, morally empty. Citizens, descendants of those who once stood to the death at Cannae, simply opened the gates, hoping to buy their way out. The spirit of resistance, civic valor, patriotism, all this had been etched out by centuries of despotism. People did not care whom they paid taxes to, a Roman patrician or a Gothic chieftain. The legionary machine of dehumanization coped with its task brilliantly. It turned free citizens into submissive biomass, ready to accept any master as long as they were not beaten too hard. Walk with your mind's eye through the ruins. The Colosseum. Now it is just a giant stone skull with empty eye sockets of arches. The arena, where blood flowed for centuries for the crowd's entertainment, is overgrown with grass. But the echo of what happened here sounds to this day. Rome left us not only aqueducts and law, it left us a blueprint. an ideal scheme of how to turn society into a barracks, how to force millions of people to march in step without asking questions. Look at the history of the last 2,000 years. Every dictator, every tyrant dreaming of world domination tried to try on Roman armor. Napoleon, Mussolini, the architects of the Third Reich, all of them were obsessed with Rome. Eagles on standards, the Roman salute, monumental architecture suppressing the human with its scale. All this is a cargo cult of the legion. Rome invented the aesthetics of totalitarianism. It showed that violence can be beautiful, orderly, bureaucratically precise. It taught humanity that order is more important than justice, and the state is more important than the individual. This is that very legacy which we are so afraid to admit. We admire the roads and laws, but studiously ignore the foundation of bones on which it all stands. Rome proved that one can create the highest civilization based on absolute cruelty. That one can write brilliant poems and simultaneously flay living people in the square. That humanism and empire are incompatible things. The Legion is not just a military unit. It is a virus of consciousness. The idea that might makes right and that the end justifies any means. Take a look at the statue of Augustus from Prima Porta. He stands, raising his hand in a commanding gesture, calm, ideal, divine. But now you know what hides behind this marble. You smell the burning of torched Gallic villages. You hear the crunch of bones under legionaries' boots in Dacia. You see the empty eyes of a veteran who has forgotten how to love, but remembers how to kill. The greatness of Rome is a facade behind which hides a giant slaughterhouse. And every time we hear about the necessity of a firm hand, about sacred borders and preventive strikes, we hear the voice of a ghost wandering through Europe. The ghost of the Legion. And what about that legionary? That nameless guy with whom we started this journey? Marcus, Lucius, or Gaius, whose bones crumbled to dust somewhere near York or Alexandria. He received neither glory nor wealth. He was betrayed. He was promised that he was bringing peace and civilization, but they turned him into an executioner and a marauder. His soul was put through the meat grinder of discipline, squeezed of everything human, and the empty shell was thrown onto the roadside of history. He did not die for the empire. He died so that his commander could buy himself another villa or become emperor for an hour. This is perhaps the bitterest lesson. The machine grinds up not only enemies, it primarily grinds up its own operators. And here you stand at the edge of time, looking at the wreckage of the greatest military machine in history. The dust has settled. The screams have died down. Only silence and stones remain. History has passed its sentence, and it is not subject to appeal. Any greatness built on dehumanization is doomed. You cannot build a paradise for the chosen by creating hell for everyone else. Sooner or later, hell will break inside. The walls will collapse, not because the enemy is strong, but because the defenders have rotted from within. Now that we have walked this path from the first strike of the gladius to the fall of the last stone, ask yourself one question. Look at the barbarian in an animal skin protecting his home, and at the Roman encased in armor who methodically, by instruction, wipes out an entire settlement for economic gain. Look closely and say, which of them was actually the barbarian? The one who was wild on the outside, but kept a living soul? Or the one who built a water supply system, wrote laws, but turned murder into an industry, cold and ruthless as the shine of his polished shield? The answer to this question scares us to this day. Because in the mirror of history, to our horror, we too often see not the barbarian, but the flawless, shining profile of a Roman legionary.